James and Ben back here for OddsChecker US. We got the first UFC event of the year coming up here Saturday, UFC Vegas 67, and we got a new main event. We'll talk about that in 1 second here. But let's start first in the bantamweight division. On the main card, we've got Umar Nurmagomedov taking on Raoni Barcelos, and right now you can see Umar a huge favorite, the biggest betting favorite on the card, or at least right up there. Some books having a minus 900. Barcelos the comeback plus 575, close to plus 600. I think I know which way you're going here, Ben, but let's hear your pick on this one.
I mean, yeah, for pick's sake, I'll take Nurmagomedov, but I mean, this line feels a little bit disrespectful to Barcelos. Like, sure, he might be past his prime, but I mean, he's been in some really great fights. He has some good wins. Like, I get the line. Nurmagomedov, he's way younger. He's obviously just getting into his prime. He's broken his way into the rankings. He looked excellent his last time out. I get it. I get the line, but this is a pretty big line against someone like Barcelos. So I mean, I'll pick him just because I do think he wins, but the line is really wide. Like, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing to me if there was an upset here. I mean, Barcelos, yeah, he had those 2 back-to-back losses, which he probably should have won those. But then he came out, and now he's off a win. So I think that's good that he's not coming into this fight off back-to-back losses. He kind of got back on track, and he's 35 now. But I mean, he could still do it, in my opinion. Nurmagomedov, if this goes to a decision, I wouldn't be necessarily super surprised if Barcelos could maybe get a close split. But Nurmagomedov, he'll probably take this to the ground. He's actually got pretty slick striking too. So yeah, he'll probably win.
Yeah, I'm with you. The line is way off here. Barcelos, very underrated. I thought after that Victor Henry fight, if that's the fight you were referencing, that maybe this is the end of the road for Barcelos because he looked so bad in that fight. And then we see Henry, basically the same thing happened to him in the fight after against Assunção. But he did bounce back against Trevin Jones, who we should mention is not in the UFC anymore, so not a great win there. But he's still a very tough guy to finish. Like, his last stoppage loss was back on the regional scene in April of 2014. I like Nurmagomedov here, but you know what? You can get him by decision right now. I was just looking at the method of victory. If you go to method of victory here, Umar by decision or technical decision is like minus 200. I think that's the play here. Umar's last fight, Nate Maness, that also went the distance. I can see the same thing happening here. So I think if you are going to bet this fight, to me, it's either bet the dog because the odds are crazy, or bet Umar by decision. I'm going to go Umar by decision in this one to get it done and open up the main card on Saturday night. Okay, next fight is in the women's bantamweight division. We've got Ketlen Vieira taking on Raquel Pennington. And right now, you can see this line's actually been pretty close. I'm seeing now Vieira is the favorite, slight favorite, about minus 120 around there. Which side are you on here, Ben?
I'm tempted to go Pennington, but I mean, this one, it is tough because Vieira, obviously, she has a lot of power in this fight. Although, I mean, she does, if there's a finish, it's going to be from her, but it's not like she's finishing every fight, but she does have power in her hands. She'll probably be landing the more damaging shots, which is why it kind of makes me hold off on Pennington a little bit. I mean, Pennington's been in there with like killers. I mean, sure, she got finished by Nunes, but she lasted until the 5th round. It was kind of a competitive fight. And she lost against Holm, but she's looked pretty good since then. She's not going to knock her out. She's probably not going to get a finish because I mostly see this fight standing, because if this goes to the ground, I think that's actually worse for Pennington. Even though I know she's a good submission artist and stuff. She has those 4 submission wins. But I mean, I think this is going to be a fight on the feet. And in that case, the more damaging shots will probably be coming from Vieira, which means she'll probably win. But I mean, you never know what you're getting with Pennington sometimes, because I think sometimes like she comes out and she looks absolutely dominant, and then sometimes she comes out and just a little bit flat. So I would say it's worth it to take her at these odds, considering she is even money. But this one's pretty close to my book. It's a hard one to call.
I'm going Rocky Pennington. This is a coin flip fight. I think Rocky's looked a little bit better compared to the two of them. And if you look at strength of schedule, it's kind of tough to really gauge where both of these women are in their career. You look at Pennington, Aspen Ladd, not in the UFC anymore. Macy Chasson's had some struggles. Pannie Kion's is a good win, and Mario Nuno's retired. You look at Vieira, Holly Holm and Miesha Tate are kind of on their way out, right? And she did get wins over both. The Holm fight was not great, but she did end up getting it there. But then she had that loss to Yana Kunitsukaya, which is a fight I thought she should have won. So I think this is a tricky one. I think there's 2 ways you can go about this. I would recommend the Raquel Pennington wins by decision. She is winning a lot of her fights that way. That's plus 150, so you're getting a little bit better value than just the plus 100. Or the fight goes the distance. I mean, I know Ketlen has some finishes, but that hasn't happened in a while. Her last stoppage win was back in 2017. Same thing with Rocky. I know she did defeat Macy Chasson. Chasson had a bad weight cut. I think that had more to do with that. But I think this fight definitely hits the scorecards. But I'll go Raquel Pennington just because I think she's looking a little bit better. But a very tricky and tough fight to figure out in that weight class. Okay, let's get to the middleweight division. We've got Puna Soriano taking on Roman Kopylov. And right now on OddsChecker, you'll see Puna the slight favorite, about -150. The comeback on Kopylov, +130. Who are you liking here, Ben?
This is the one fight on the card that I really think is just a coin flip for me. And because of that, because of the odds, I'm tempted to take Kopylov just because he's getting plus money. But I just don't think that Soriano is -160 favorite in this spot for the right reason. I mean, both of these guys have been kind of struggling a little bit to start. I mean, Soriano, he had those back-to-back losses. Granted, that was Brendan Allen. That was a tough one. But Nick Maximov, I feel like that's a fight he probably could have and should have won. And I would have been a little bit more comfortable backing him here if he did win that one. He would have been coming off back-to-back wins. He looked good his last time out. But then again, so did Kopylov. I mean, he kind of struggled to start his UFC career. You know, he had that loss against Roberson and Duraev, and then he came out and got a knockout win as well. So kind of both of these guys are in a similar spot that they're kind of just starting to pick it up now. They got a win under their belt, but I just don't know if I like backing Soriano with -160 juice. I'm going to feel like an idiot if I do that, and then he ends up losing. So I feel like in this spot, I just have to take Kopylov just because he's getting the better line here.
Yeah, I'm staying away from this fight. Two really inconsistent fighters. The story with Puna really is that he just hasn't been healthy. He had some concussion issues. He hasn't been as active as I think we would like. And you can't take too much away from his last win because the guy he fought is Indalcha Langambula is, I don't know if he's still on the roster, but he's on his way out. He hasn't been doing very well in the UFC. And Kopylov, same thing, a lot of inconsistency there in terms of his skill set. And Puna's fought the better opposition. That Nick Maximov fight, Puna was clearly injured in that fight, and had he not been injured, I think he probably would have won. But still, it was not a great performance regardless. So I'm going to take Puna just because I think he hits harder. I think it stays standing. I think he lands the better shots. But no bet, no play for me on this. I'm staying far away from this matchup because again, I think both fighters very inconsistent. Okay. Next fight is the co-main event. Dan Ige taking on Damon Jackson. And right now you can see Dan Ige is the slight favorite, about -125, -115 on some books. The comeback on Damon Jackson, you'll see there, is the underdog in most cases. Which way are you going here?
This one's tough because I love Damon Jackson. I'm a big Damon Jackson fan, and he's looking really good lately. He's obviously got those four wins in his past 5. And Dan Ige, kind of the opposite. He's lost 4 of his last 5. Now, granted, when you look at who those fights were against, I mean, it's a pretty tough schedule. You look at those losses: Calvin Kattar, Sung Jung,
Emmett, who's fighting for the title next month.
Emmett. That. I mean, these losses, this resume is really aging quite well when you look at who the losses are against. So it's hard to kind of fault him for losing 4 of his last 5. And part of me wants to think oh, this is his bounce back spot. Because if he can get this fight to the ground, I don't know whether he can actually control Jackson. I mean, Jackson, he's a long, slick grappler. He does have some good submission wins on his record. Most of his wins, it seems like, I think let's see here, 15 of his 22 wins are by submission. So it seems like when he's winning, it's by that method. And on the feet, I'd say they're maybe kind of close, but I don't see where Damon Jackson really wins this fight, in my opinion, except outside of a submission. But Ige's not an easy guy to sub. So it's he's never been submitted before. So just for that reason, I think that Ige has a better path to victory here. But I will say it's a toss-up, and the line is close. I mean, it's close for a reason. It is a close fight. But I see Jackson winning this fight by submission if he's going to, and Ige is just a tough guy to submit. So, I mean, I want to take Ige here, probably to win by decision.
Yeah, we're on the same page here. I also really like Damon Jackson a lot. I think it's been a good story for him. People forget that he was signed to the UFC years ago. I think had a fight and then got cut and then made his way back to the UFC all these years later. And he's gone on quite the run. But you just mentioned it there, the level of opposition. Dan Ige has fought some of the best fighters in the weight class, and he hasn't gotten finished. I think that's a key detail in this fight because you mentioned it there. Jackson does win by submission. Ige's never lost via stoppage in his entire career. That's a tall task, and it's only a 3-round fight. I don't think Jackson's going to be able to do it. Now, look, Jackson surprised the hell out of me in his last fight against Pat Sabatini, finishing Pat in the first round. So, I mean, we have seen surprises with this fighter, but I think getting Dan Ige like -125 is kind of a steal. Dare I say that? I think Ige is extremely durable. He's kind of like a good fighter everywhere. He doesn't really excel in one particular area. I think his striking's good, ground game, wrestling, all that's good. And I think honestly, it's better than what Jamin Jackson's going to bring to the table here. So not only do I like Ige straight up, but I will take him by decision as well, because I don't know if he'll be able to finish Jamin Jackson. And typically, Ige doesn't finish his opponents. He had the one win over Gavin Tucker. He had a couple wins over, Danny Henry and Mike Santiago. But typically, when he's fighting these higher level fighters, he's going the distance. So I like Ige here a lot. I'm actually surprised the line's this low. I would have paid, if I was to do the lines, I would do Ige 2-1 around there. Nothing against Jackson. I think very highly of Ige, and I think he wins the decision here. So that's gonna be my pick. Okay, main event. It was supposed to be Kelvin Gastelum and Nassourdine Imavov. Gastelum gets a mouth injury. You can go research that, something with his tooth and some staph and all this different stuff. And in steps Sean Strickland. Now, a key detail about this fight before I get your pick here is that this fight's at 205. So for the short notice fighter and Sean Strickland, I think that's a big benefit with him going in, because he doesn't have to worry about cutting weight. And we should also point out that Strickland used to fight at 170. So, I don't think he would have to cut like a ton of weight anyways, at least not compared to some of the other guys in that weight class. But anyways, we get a 5-round, 205-pound main event fight. Another key tidbit as well is that Strickland does live and train in Vegas. So it's not like he has to travel. He just walks down the street and he is at this fight in this main event, basically. So this is where we're at. And the odds makers, it's been close. Look at this, -110, -115, a lot of question marks. We'll get into why that is in a second. But Ben, I got to get your pick here first.
The line is actually moved, interestingly enough. I saw Strickland as a bigger favorite. So, that implies action is coming on Imavov, and that's where I'm going. I think that he's had a full when you're having him with a full camp. I know he was preparing for a different guy, a different fighter, but still a full camp versus Strickland a month ago when Imavov was probably starting or in his camp. He was getting his face bashed in by Jared Cannonier. So it's a tough spot, like you said, no travel. It's gonna be at an easier weight for him. So those things are working in his favor. But Jared Cannonier landed the most strikes he ever has in a fight, in that 5-round fight. And he went 5 hard rounds with him in that split decision loss. So we all know Strickland. He's a crazy guy. He's probably coming in on, he took this fight because he's like, oh, I'm going to bounce back from that split decision loss. I love his heart. I love everything about him. I think he keeps his hand low. He eats shots. It seems like he can eat any shot. The fact that he wasn't knocked out by Cannonier is impressive in and of itself. I love him as a fighter. I just think when you have Imavov coming in with a full camp, he's really good on the ground. He's a really good striker. And then you consider the fact that he's going to be beating up on a guy who just got beat up a month ago. He wasn't knocked out in that fight, but that almost might be worse because he took more strikes because of it. So it's a really tough spot. I think that it's hard to pass on Imavov at -110 here, but Strickland's a guy who can surprise you. Could he come out and just have one of the best fights of his career? Yeah. He's a crazy guy. He could come out and have an amazing fight. But I just think this is a good spot for Imavov with this line, especially.
Now, I'll preface this by saying that I did have Imavov against Gastelum. I thought that was a very good matchup for him. And I think Gastelum, with the layoff, the age, the injuries, everything, it was a prime fight for Imavov. But I think going from Gastelum to Strickland is such a huge jump up here. And I think one of the things we learned in that fight with Jared Cannonier is that Cannonier, Strickland is a top 5 fighter. The fact that he was even that close with Cannonier and coming off that brutal loss to Alex Pereira, the fight prior to that, I think shows this is a really tough test here. Think about going from Joaquin Buckley, no offense to Buckley here, who's not even ranked, to Sean Strickland, who's arguably a top 5 guy. That's a huge jump for him. Now, you're absolutely right about Imavov having a full camp for this. There was plenty of notice. I actually had a chance to speak to Imavov before this fight, and he had plenty of notice and was primed to take this fight. But if you follow Sean Strickland at Instagram, he's in the gym every day. I granted he's not training for a specific opponent, but I don't think the camp thing is going to be that much of a factor. And then you add in the fact that Strickland's been 5 rounds before, Imavov hasn't. There's been some questions about his cardio. Can that hold up? I think with a guy like Strickland, it's going to be very interesting. And the other thing with Strickland is, you mentioned it there against Cannonier. Cannonier couldn't finish him. There's one guy at middleweight that's finished him, and that's the current champ. And that same champ knocked out the former champ in Israel Adesanya. So I think it just goes to show that a lot of guys are getting knocked out by Pereira. But if you look at it here, Jack Hermanson was a good win. I thought that should have been a unanimous. Hall was a solid victory. Jocko, I know both of these fighters not in the UFC anymore, but I just think Strickland's kind of like Ige, a very good, well-rounded fighter that's also tough to take out. So my theory on this fight is, if Imavov can't finish Strickland, I think Strickland probably wins a decision here. So that's actually the way I'm going in this fight. I think with that experience, the level of opposition, I just think it's too much of a jump up. Now, look, maybe Imavov will surprise us and he's better than we even thought. That's entirely possible. That's one of the reasons I was kind of banking on him to beat Gastelum, but Strickland is a legit top 5 fighter. Gastelum, on the other hand, I don't think he is. I think he's more towards that 10 to 15 range of the fighters here. And honestly, Strickland really has nothing to lose here. Like, he's fighting at 205. He doesn't have to cut weight. He's doing the UFC a favor. Yeah, he's coming off 2 losses, but I don't think this is really going to affect him in the grand scheme of things. Imavov is supposed to be the future. How many main event opportunities are you going to get? Strickland's had plenty. So I think from all those standpoints, I'm going to go Sean Strickland by decision. I might, in general, just go the fight goes the distance, because I just think it's going to be very tough to take out Strickland when you had, like I said, a guy in Jared Cannonier who wasn't able to do it as well. And we've seen Cannonier get how many knockouts? Brunson and so many other fighters, right? So, pick's going to be Strickland, and I think the fight does go the full 5 rounds. It's not up yet, but I'm sure it will be. And I don't imagine it'll be cheap either, but still, I think that's kind of the way things go.
I would be interested to see if Strickland actually looks to use like his wrestling game a bit. He's underrated on the ground. He just hasn't used it. Especially people kind of knocked him for not doing that against Alex Pereira, because they're like, oh man, he could have grappled with him and won, and then he ended up getting knocked out. But I mean, he beat Jack Hermanson. I think it's easy to overlook that win, but I mean that's a great win. Like, I agree with you. He's definitely a top 5 fighter for me. He has really impressive wins before those back-to-back losses. So fading Strickland off back-to-back losses is a scary thing, because he's probably going to come out there and do whatever he needs to win. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's a toss-up. I just like Imavov because of the odds, but I really won't be surprised if Strickland won. And he was actually a bigger favorite before, so you can get a good line on him. If you like Strickland, it's like the best line maybe on him right now, at least.
And I'll just mention it one more time. Like, there is that what if factor with Imavov. Maybe he rises to the occasion. He looks better than we've ever seen. We've seen that happen with younger fighters. We should mention that Imavov's only 26, right? So not a finished product. I think you could argue what you're seeing with Strickland is probably what you're going to end up with the rest of his career, right? I don't think he's going to get any better, or I mean, he probably will get worse as he gets older. But right now, I think he's sort of in the prime. So this could be a surprise here, which is why I'm not going to actually I think the only bet I'll do in this fight is maybe Strickland by decision, or the fight goes the distance. But I'm not. I know it's -110, but I still think like there's that what if with Imavov. So I'm actually not going to bet Strickland straight up just for that exact reason. So there you go. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week with the big UFC 283 pay-per-view. Hope you guys had a great holiday season. We're excited to be back, and enjoy the fights this weekend.